Hi again. In Armageddon Now, Dwight Wilson. In this chapter, Balfour Betrayed, Wilson has been dealing with the ambiguity of evangelicals in the 1920s and 30s, their ambiguity about anti-Semitism. And now he quotes a poem by one R.H. McCartney on this very subject of how Christians, or evangelical Christians, generally viewed Israel in the 1930s. Wilson says these many cross-currents were summarized in Hands Off, a poem by R.H. McCartney, which Bauman included in his treatise. Now, this is Louis Bauman in his book Shirts and Sheets, or Anti-Semitism, a Present-Day Sign of the First Magnitude. McCartney's poem goes like this: Hands off, ye fools, beware of what you do. To man or nation 'tis most surely true, a curse on those who persecute the Jew. Ye have not marked him, surely 'tis his God. He standeth now beneath chastising rod, yet greatest rebel on the earthly sod. Jehovah set apart, and not in vain, with a more fatal mark than once on Cain. For centuries the butt of grief and pain. They have been sinners, surely sinners great. Jehovah chose them for a high estate, that they to earth his glory should relate, to stand his witnesses to near and far, who to earth's night should be a glorious star, to give hope to a world that sin did not mar, or that sin did mar, when all the world a whoring from him went, debauchery and wickedness man's sole intent. 'Twas then Jehovah in his sovereign grace took by the hand to have one chosen race, to set the Jew before the wide world's face. They were to be his monuments of grace, his priests, his witnesses to human race, head of all nations during time and space. Hands off, O Gentile, or be grief your dower. They still are girdled by Jehovah's power. Who else could keep them for a gracious hour? Though curse be on them yet, and they must go to ghastly depths of suffering and woe, yet woe to hand who shall that woe bestow. Hands off, I say, for lo, Jehovah still hath a high place, now wretched Jews shall fill, and none can hinder that, what is his will. A renovated world, a new-born earth, no curse of sickness, nor a case of dearth, a world of happiness and song and mirth. Lo then, the Jew once more takes highest place, the priests, the leaders of the human race, but then, blood-washed in Christ's atoning grace, of former evil in the Jew no trace. A heaven on earth shall be in every space, and earth behold the glory of Christ's face. End of McCartney's poem. Wilson says the irony of the hands-off attitude was that it resulted in closing the eyes or looking the other way as the German final solution of Jewish extermination developed. Pleas from Europe for assistance for Jewish refugees fell on deaf ears, and hands-off meant no helping hand. So in spite of being theologically more pro-Jewish than any other Christian group, the pre-millenarians also were apathetic because of a residual anti-Semitism, because persecution was prophetically expected, because it would encourage immigration to Palestine, because it seemed the beginning of the Great Tribulation, and because it was a wonderful sign of the imminent blessed hope. The Nazi persecution also stimulated new interest in the protocols of the Elders of Zion. Arno C. Gaebelein, in his book The Conflict of the Ages, The Mystery of Lawlessness, Its Origin, Historic Development, and Coming Defeat, seemed to provide legitimacy for the Nazi attitude. He ridiculed claims that the protocols had been proved a forgery, and emphasized that the whole program of conspiracy was actually being carried out by the Russian communists. He claimed that, quote, a painstaking and deeper study of the protocols, compared with present-day world conditions, must lead, and does lead, to the conviction that the plan of the protocols, whoever concocted it, is not a crude forgery. Behind it are hidden, unseen actors, powerful and cunning, who follow the plan still, bent on the overthrow of our civilization. End of quote. Thomas M. Chalmers, writing in The King's Business, also saw Satan's hand in the protocols. However, he assured his readers that Satan was using it not to destroy our civilization, but to stir up hatred of the Jews themselves, trying to exterminate God's chosen people. This was not a moral wrong to be resisted, however. Quote again from the same work, "Since Satan has advanced so far in his murderous campaign, we may expect all nations to join in this warfare." In Shirts and Sheets, Louis S. Bauman spoke of the protocols as a divisive issue among premillenarians, but he refused to take sides as to whether it was a forgery or not, saying that it did not make any difference anyway, for even if it were legitimate, it represented the views of only a small group of Jews and was no stigma upon the whole race. Time magazine carried a report that the protocols was being distributed by Moody Bible Institute. Although this was denied by the Institute, apparently Time's editor believed it to be a credible possibility. The Evangel magazine consistently condemned the document as a forgery, but even in 1935, as if the protocols were authentic, reported the reading of a paper criticizing the document before the Prophecy Investigation Society. It still remained a viable issue. Even by the end of the decade, a leading light of the premillenarians, William Bell Riley, could still accept the protocols as genuine. It is impossible, of course, to assess the extent to which the protocols deceived and thus influenced the attitudes of the premillenarians, but the firmness with which a paper like the Evangel opposed the prejudices aroused by the document indicates this was a serious problem. More about that subject next time. Put in a link to Who Has History Vindicated? One of the Jewish Christians of that day, one of the most famous Jewish Christians of that day, was David Barron. David Barron talked about this period of time and what would result from Zionism and where this would all lead. And he was very optimistic about the ultimate result, but very pessimistic about the decades that would lead up to that ultimate result, in terms of the movement that he saw already underway, strongly underway, by about 1914 to 18 when he wrote his commentary on Zechariah. So I'll put in a link to Who Has History Vindicated? J.F. Rutherford, who wrote The Finished Mystery in that very period, or David Barron. See you soon.